I'm going to introduce a concept, a framework that you can utilize to create your own marketing strategy. And it's going to, although it has multiple steps, I'm going to specifically talk about the portion where you decide your market, who's your market, and how you find it. So I'm going to just lay out the process, lay out all the steps, and then once the steps are laid out, then we're going to discuss each step one at a time. Start. And I'm going to go back and forth between my notes because I don't have all of this memorized. I used to have them memorized. Then got old. Audience, AUD, stands for audience. That's our target market. We'll discuss that in a minute. MSG is not the stuff in your Chinese food. It stands for message. Cont is content. CH is channel. All right. So basically, this is just, I'm going to review everyone, and then by the time I'm done, you're going to realize this is actually really familiar to you. You've actually seen it all, you've done it all, and you've read about it all. But now I'm going to bring it all together in a nice, comprehensive way that it just makes a lot of sense. So when I first start any marketing assignment, my first question is, what is my CLV? CLV stands for customer lifetime value. So I'm going to just write it out. Customer lifetime value. And my handwriting isn't the best, but you'll get it. Now, understanding CLV is one approach. Another approach, of course, is understanding what's your TAM, total addressable market, or total available market, and SAM, your specific or serviceable available market. So that ultimately leads you to the question of target market. But I always start here. You can start there. Either way, I'll show you how it all is kind of literally the same thing. Customer lifetime value is how is understanding which one of your customers generates how much money for you. So just to give my most favorite example is your cable company. Your cable company is charging you, let's just say on average, $100 a month. Times 12, you're paying $1,200 a year to your cable company. Now your cable company knows you're going to stay in your apartment on average of approximately 5 years. And that gives them a 7,200 life CLV for you specifically. That's how much money they're going to make off you, $7,200. That's a lot of money. Now, usually my argument is, I use this to start, how much money are you going to invest in your total marketing? Well, all your marketing dollars is roughly 7 to 15% of your profit. So if you're investing, let's say on average 10%, let's just call this 10%, you're spending $720 per customer to make $7,200 over the lifetime of that customer's relationship with you and your services. And that's as simple as understanding what the lifetime value is. Now, some customers generate more, some customers generate less, depending on how much it costs you to do marketing. That's your cost of goods sold. So understanding whether you're retaining current customers, or in the case of everyone in this who's hopefully watching this, acquiring customers. Acquisition is always more expensive than retention. When it comes to acquisition, it's just going to cost you more. But retaining, keeping them happy, you've already got them. All you got to do is just do a couple of incentives, a couple of contests. Now, I'm going to get back to that in a minute. Just keep watching. So retaining versus acquisition, that's the understanding understanding how much does it cost. Cost of goods sold. This is a very basic accounting term. It includes all the stuff that goes into creating your product, manufacturing, distributing, but in our case, it's just cost of how much it costs to promote and market and ultimately sell this product or service, or even getting your mission, seeing your mission come into reality. So If understanding how much your customers make, you have to, and understanding which one of your customers make the most, let's just say you know for a fact, and I'm going to say there's customer A, customer B, customer C. Customer A, based on our cable example, is going to be we're going to make $7,200 over their lifetime. Customer B probably $6,800, and customer C is probably $8,400. Based on that, well, guess which customer I'm going to focus on? Customer C. So the number one point you should take away with when you're starting and understanding your lifetime value, the customer lifetime value, is have a laser focus on that customer. And understanding that laser focus is going to bring you back over and over and over to answering questions you may have about the campaigns you're going to deploy for your marketing. Laser focus, so remember that. Next, good thing I have my handy dandy notes here. So, there's a number of objectives that we typically think about when we want to either retain or acquire a customer. One of our primary objectives is generating awareness for our brand. Second is call to action. Call to act. Call to action. Very, very important. Third, transaction. Transaction. And then, every now and then you want to find out what your customers are thinking. That's your research. That's your feedback. That's your insights, whatever you want to call it. But these are the primary objectives that you want to achieve once you start your marketing. And yes, you do have to do marketing to actually get feedback. You got to promote your surveys. Once you understand that, then you're going to want to put it into a kind of, actually, let me just get into the next phase before I get into that, because I'm going to get back to your SAM and TAM. Audience. The most important thing about your audience is you have to understand who they are. You have to understand where. Where are they? Where do you reach them? How do you reach them? And more importantly, what drives them? What motivates them? What gets them to make the decisions that you want them to make? How do they decide to buy things, to buy your products? How many steps in that process? So, we're starting with the concept of total market. That number is going to help you understand whether you should even be in this market in the first place. Total market, how big is it? You understand that you have a SAM too. And that's the actual market you're probably going to more likely sell to. And then you're sort of getting closer to that. And then you have your SOM, S-O-M, observable market. Specific or serviceable. These are the people who are literally, actually, more practically going to buy your product. So the total size, probable size, actual size of your market. Oh, excuse me for 1 second. Damn it. All right. Now, the way I look at this is too many acronyms, too much gobbledygook. So think about it this way. Instead of looking at it as a kind of like black hole, right? Think of it more like, and I'll draw this out more specifically, think of it more like this. It's a funnel. Black hole, funnel, whatever you want to call it. Where instead of looking at my TAM, SAM, and I'm looking at this as my awareness. How many people overall can I get to make aware of my product? They're going to go into my funnel. They're going to go into my black hole. Secondly, of those people who are now aware of my product, how many people are actually going to take the action that I want them to take? Initially, that action could be as much as just giving you their email or calling into your 800 number. Now, as you sort of go through this funnel, they're going to finally go into the transaction. Now, understanding what these different layers are and how to get them from TAM to actual target market, understanding that is all about understanding how many steps do they make before they decide. There's a number of marketing answers to this. The price of it, how much is the price influence, how much do their friends influence. But a big thing that the TAM-SAM model doesn't always address is It's asking you to make decisions based on what is already out there. What about when you have to when you come up with a product that doesn't exist? Who would have ever thought that there's a market for this? And yet, it is a multi-million-dollar business, because rather than following this, it just simply made people aware of the product and take the action of buying it. They priced it low enough, they made it addictive enough to people with, they need to constantly be twitching and fidgeting around like yours truly, and ultimately get you to actually buy it. So, in this model, understanding your audience is also a matter of helping them understanding what it'll take to get them all the way to this point. And of course, this model repeats itself. You can, once you've gotten the transaction, you want them to come back. Now you're talking about retention. And then that process repeats all over. Now, sometimes a person will come in through your, one of your customers will come in through the top of your funnel, and guess what? They exit the funnel. They're not interested. So now you have to work to get them back in. Maybe they reach a different level and they go back out. Now you have to work to get them back in. So this process can be perpetual and ongoing as long as you understand where they dropped off at this stage and what you need to do to re-engage them. Now, I'm going to tell you what you need to do to re-engage them, because you thought I was going to leave you hanging, didn't you? Let me just check in my battery here. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. If you start out at the top of your funnel, let's say your TAM is 1,000 people. 1,000 people are prospective customers are going into your funnel. Not everyone, as you probably know, is not going to actually end up taking the actions you want. At most, maybe 10% of your 1,000 will. 10% is, let's say now you've got 100 people who are actually taking that action, who are now becoming your serviceable, addressable market, or specific addressable market, or specific available market. That's the problem with these acronyms. They can all mean the same thing. Now let's say now, by the time you get to your transaction part of your funnel, it's only 10. So what started out as 1,000 customers who are aware, who is your possible market, are now actually buying and doing the action you want them to take. That's just 1%. And I'm using a very arbitrary but easy to understand number so that you can understand that it's not as easy as long as they know about it, they'll buy. That's not necessarily the case. So now moving on, one of the things that allows you to understand this process and get them through it is the voice. The voice is another word for voice is positioning. And positioning is who or what you are. That's basically what you want them to think of you, what you want your customers to think of you. And of course, perception. Perception is what they actually think of you. What they actually think. So there's more than one of the most famous examples, and I'm sure you guys have probably read about it and are very likely going to laugh, is this company called Juicero. Juicero says, you know what? People need a brand new juicer that does it all, automatically, from my handset. Unfortunately, the amount of technology we have to put into that means that Juicero is probably going to cost close to $1,000. So they took all this money from all these investors. And Juicero came out at a price point of $700 and change. Within weeks, nobody wanted it. It was the most stupidest idea anybody ever heard. So they thought they were the coolest thing ever, but the market realized this is the stupidest idea ever. So now there are plenty of discrepancies between these two, and getting them right, just right, is where your research comes in, where your insights come in, and understanding which part of the process they are, or which part of the decision-making process your customers are in. But as long as you understand that that's what a voice sounds. Now, the reason this is so important is because eventually you want everyone in the organization sounding the same, speaking the same, talking the same. And as a result, you want every channel through which you communicate with, whether it be press releases or your website or your social channels, to actually have the same exact voice. Now, the reason this is so important and I spend a lot of time working on this, is because I used to manage a social marketing agency. And when I did that, people would say, hey, get me on Twitter. Problem is, when I got them on Twitter, it never worked. Why? Because I was sounding like me. And the people who worked for me were sounding like they sounded. They weren't sounding like a third-party representative of our client, of the people managing Twitter accounts for a company that has a deeply ingrained culture and everyone loves the brand and how they sound. So imagine if Apple started dropping F-bombs in their messaging or in their store signage. It wouldn't be Apple. If they started using blues and greens in their furniture, it wouldn't be Apple. So everything from the color to the sounds to the cues, everything that you see, the messaging, the people in the ads, everything has to sound and be consistent. And as a result, getting this right so that what you want people to hear you versus what you sound starts to actually be the same. A shorthand approach for doing this, especially for a startup or an established company that's never done this, is to think about when you think of your company, what celebrity comes to mind? If you could hire one, which celebrity would that be? Now, thinking about it in that term, you quickly realize that celebrity, the way they sound, that is more analogous to the way you want to sound. And then it's a shorthand way to just get your positioning and your perception aligned, get your voice right. Next, messaging. It's simple. And literally, keep it simple. Keep your messaging simple. Your messaging should tell what is your story. What's your story? Excuse my handwriting, but what's your story is helping customers understand your value proposition. Now, when you think of, I'll give you an example. When you think of, say, 15% or more on your car insurance, what comes to mind? Why does that company come to mind? Because they have kept their message simple. You're saving money, and not only just any type of money, 15%. It tells you what the value proposition is, all in that same message. And more importantly, it doesn't matter how they say it. They could say it with comedians. They could say it with geckos. They could say it with cavemen. Which way they say it, no matter how many voices they use, it's the same exact consistent message. So the important thing that you should take away from messaging is that it should be consistent, simple, and to keep it all together, you should absolutely be using a calendar, some kind of editorial calendar, so that no matter where you're putting your messaging, it's all scheduled and consistent and based on the time of day when your customer is most likely to get in your funnel, stay in your funnel, move down your funnel, and follows their decision-making steps. Content. Content is my favorite. Content is so you probably have a camera, and the group decide, well, that guy with the camera is going to be the guy taking all the photos and doing all the pictures, and he's going to be the guy who creates all the cool messaging and all the cool content that's going to live on our social networks. It's going to be our flyers. Well, one of the things about content is that you don't realize how important it is until you actually need it. Think about when you're talking to your customers to get them. Think about a diamond is forever. Think about, they don't just say that over and over. Somebody wrote that. Somebody made sure that that message appears next to very expensive diamonds every time you see it. Somebody made sure that every time you see that message, it's appealing in one way or to another to their target audience. That company, as well as the, say, 15% or less on your car insurance company, both of those, and Just Do It company, they're focused, laser focused, on their specific target market, what they want, what they need, and they're addressing those things based on the content that they use to communicate. Never, ever, ever skimp on your content. Invest in production. Invest in your content. Okay, why is that so important? I'm going to introduce you to a concept called the long tail, if you don't already know about the long tail. The long tail is you basically put it there, and no matter how long it's there, it will eventually sell. Why? Amazon kind of started doing this. And in fact, the founders of Wired Magazine wrote a book about it. The long tail basically says that this is your curve, that's your time, and number of sales, right? The moment you launch, you're selling, but your sales is not consistent, your sales is going to drop off. But it doesn't just fall off a cliff and that's it. No, it continues. The reason Amazon is so successful today is because they can have merchandise on their site indefinitely, and it will always sell. Whereas a retailer, more traditional retail on shelves, they've got to take the item off. So once the item is taken off the shelf, it stops. Online, it continues. That is your long tail. That's why your content is so important to helping you generate awareness and bring your market down to your specific target market and, of course, your specific buyer. So the long tail is one of the most important reasons why you should invest in your content. If you've got garbage content, guess what? You're going to have garbage sales. Second, now there has been one of the things that I mentioned earlier. If your friend has a camera, he's the official content guy. This is a lot of companies have come to rely on user-generated content to sort of tell their user-generated content, to tell their brand story, to tell their story. The problem is when you allow other people to tell your story, you're relying entirely on perception. You're not even incorporating positioning. You're letting someone else say what's important about your brand as opposed to taking control of it yourself. Now think about this for a second. Chipotle has been out in the market for years touting their amazing ingredients there, and you've probably been in one. But what happens? Somebody gets sick from E. coli. And now everybody's talking about how bad it is to eat a Chipotle because you can get E. coli. So that's an example of over-relying on user-generated content instead of going out front and telling your story. Now, of course, Chipotle is no dummy. They've got professionals out there, and they're aggressively trying to retell their story over and over and over again. And not only that, going back to their suppliers, going out to the way they prepare and training to improve the overall experience and quality of the food. Which brings me to the next point. Quality control. Now, relying on someone who is not a professional to generate the content that's going to get your customers from awareness to transaction, get them down the funnel, and ultimately buy your products. Relying on someone who's not a professional to do that is a recipe for disaster. Now, if it is much easier to say, I'm going to invest all my money on my production, all my money on distribution, all my money on legal, which you're definitely going to need to do. Pay your taxes. Well, now they're cheaper thanks to your friendly neighborhood president. However, that being said, you have to invest in your marketing. And the big chunk of investing in your marketing is the message, the content, the type of content you produce. Now, producing one ad and then repurposing that so that you can show that same ad on TV, on YouTube, on some digital billboard in Times Square, that can work, but only for so long. Because today's market, they want more, faster, and all of it high quality and for free. So you're literally telling a story that conveys your value proposition in a ton of different ways that are all consistent, that are all told in a specific schedule, that are not necessarily exclusively dependent on users, but depending on yourself, because they will last for the life of the decision-making process until your customer finally purchases your product or service. The most important takeaway I can tell you about all of this is make your content relevant. So that's to say that understanding who your customers are, who your audience is, what drives them, understanding all that allows you to make the content more relevant. So that's to say you're not going to pitch football games to an audience that appreciates baseball games, for example. You're not going to pitch knitwear tops to a bunch of dudes who wear t-shirts. You know, it's just understanding who your audience is will help you get to your relevant messaging. So if you catch yourself watching music videos, maybe more hip-hop than rock, that's what's relevant to you. Understanding what your audience is into helps you understand what's relevant to them. And all of that is determined by your research, and which I believe you've covered before, and understanding the insight. And those insights will drive how your message. That's what those insights are used for, to determine your voice, your messaging, and the type of content you pick. Your channel. Channels. One of the things that I first started talking about, of course, was in my own career was using social media. And in social media, you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter. Social media is free. We should be on social media. You've also got magazines, print. and newspapers. You've got broadcasts like radio and television and cable. You've got out of home, which is not only the digital billboards, but also street furniture. There's a million different channels you have, and they're all accessible to you depending on what stage in your business you're in and how much funding you have. But the most important takeaway is you choose the channel. Don't let the channel choose you. You choose the channel, not the other way around. Choose. Why is this such a big deal? Well, if you haven't, once you start your business, you're going to start signing up to everything, and you're going to put ads on Facebook, and you're going to start receiving all kinds of messaging from Facebook. Advertise more, advertise more, advertise more from Twitter. Promote this or promote this tweet, and from Google, $150 AdWords credit if you spend $150. Every channel is telling you to spend on them. And that's just the social media sites. You're going to see business accounts on Pinterest and Instagram. You're going to see, and that's once you get to the big leagues, you're going to get all kinds of magazine guys calling you, and print guys, and newspaper guys. Everyone's going to call you for your money. It's very easy to say, well, I want to see my ads on Facebook because all my friends are on Facebook. But that's just you letting the channel choose you. That's not you choosing the channel. Now, we started this conversation by saying, are you retaining or acquiring? What stage are you in? Creating awareness, and if you're getting awareness, who's your audience? You might find out that your audience is not necessarily on Instagram. Maybe they're on Snapchat. Maybe your audience is on Twitter. Maybe your audience isn't even on social media. Maybe the best way to reach them is direct mailers, sending snail mail to their houses. But at the end of the day, understanding the channel is the best way to pick the channel as opposed to letting the channel pick you. And once you've picked it, you've got to commit. Got to commit. Commitment doesn't mean you do one campaign, it doesn't give you what you want, it doesn't work. Commitment means you spend 1 month or 1 quarter. You spend again second quarter using the insights that you gained from the first expense. And then the third time around, that's when you really know what's going to work, and then you go all in. Commitment is very important when you choose your media, when you decide to now finally go into spending your money, because that commitment, you're never going to know what's going to work unless you actually commit. And you're never going to get good at it, and your audience is never going to get through that funnel if they only see you once instead of over and over and over again. It is a proven fact. Whenever any company, no matter how big or small, whether they're spending $1 billion or $100, when they spend the money, that's when sales go up. When they don't, that's when sales go down. So committing to the channel and deciding what channel. Now, all of the feedback, metrics, information, data, all of that is a result of this, of the channels. All the channels are giving you different information. Likes, how many shares, how many retweets, how many, whatever you call it, they're all giving you information. And you know what? None of them match. So whatever amount of shares and views you get on LinkedIn is entirely different than the views you get on YouTube. And the amount of likes you get on Instagram is going to be different than what Facebook is saying you actually got. In that world, how do you actually know what's working and what isn't working? Well, here's the kicker, and here's the stuff that none of those sites ever tell you. If and when you start advertising in print magazines, the number you're going to get is circulation. If and when you start advertising in broadcast, the number you're going to get is ratings. How can you make ratings, circulation, and likes all correlate? And if you're emailing, which is actually one of my favorite, direct communication with your customer, is it the open? Is it the click-through? At the end of the day, we want one thing. If this is your product or service, you just want to get people down the funnel, right? Down this funnel and into here. The way you do it is wherever you're putting your money. If it's TV, it's got to direct people to that. And that could be your website. That could be your 800 number. That could be your store. Whatever it is, you want people to go there. And if you're spending on TV, if you're spending on Facebook, if you're spending on radio, if you're spending in out of home, which is again street furniture or billboards, whatever you're spending, or Twitter, wherever you're spending your money, it's got to redirect people back to one source. And now once everyone is back at that source, you're now able to understand from that source how many phone calls came in, how many foot traffic came in, how many visits and clicks on your website. all of it to help you understand what stage in a single customer's decision-making process you are in, so that you can actually drive that sale, that transaction. Now, let's say you get, 1 million likes on Facebook. And of that 1 million likes, you get maybe 1,000 visits. Of the 1,000 visits, you're probably just going to get maybe 10 people to buy something. Is that good or bad? That's actually pretty good. It's still 1% of your sales based on this generic number. But how much did it cost you to get 1 million likes? Probably, $1,000. And that's only if you have really great content. Maybe $1 million if you're selling something that everyone else is selling. But the idea is getting 1 million likes on Facebook is not the goal. The goal is getting those 1 million likes to convert, to come back to your final destination, to actually purchase something that you're selling. And that does not happen simply by throwing money at Google or Facebook or Twitter or television or wherever. It happens by strategically putting money into these different buckets so that you can get your customers down through this funnel and ultimately end it here. So, I want to conclude by saying a couple of things. If you want to run a campaign using this model, it's quite simple. I'm going to use Reading to illustrate. You start here, of course, as you know. Now, we want to start a campaign where we are acquiring customers. And customer acquisition, our first goal of business is to create awareness, especially if you're all startups. Secondly, let's say we already know it's only going to be one, let's just for the sake of convenience, I had pointed out earlier, customer C. But you can absolutely target customer A, B, and C, just different ways, so that those numbers, those customer lifetime values actually make sense for you. But let's just say it's one customer. Now, you're using one voice. Again, you're not limited to one, but just to keep it simple, we're using one voice. Your messaging, it could be one type of message, one value proposition. Maybe your value proposition is about price. Maybe it's about convenience. Maybe it's about service. Maybe it's about just doing good is not necessarily the value proposition that drives the most number of sales. As you tweak your messaging, you'll determine what your value propositioning is, the value prop that targets your customer. Now, if you're unsure, if you're not always 100%, we like this, we like that, always ask yourself the question, what does our customer want, and laser focus on that. If you're thinking about going after customers who are in the college market versus customers who are possibly working adults, or versus customers who are parents of working adults, well, the question comes: which one of those three makes you the most money? College. Well, of the college, do they want that message or that message? They want this message. So you stick to that, and we're going to review more of that in the workshop later. Finally, the type of content, of course, you're not limited to any, but let's say you have like maybe 3 types of content out there, all of them delivering the same message over and over. And now you're putting it through, each type of content, you're putting it through 3 types of channels. And I'll leave that entirely up to you to decide, but we can have a conversation about that next time. Now, once you're there, that is campaign A. Campaign A. As you probably already realized, you can do campaign B, campaign C. Each campaign drives a different metric, drives a different objective, all with the purpose of getting customers as quickly as possible and as profitably as possible through your funnel. Now that you understand this, something more technical, you can now automate this process. Marketing automation is a big deal, and all of the social sites, many tools, third-party tools, are all out there trying to convince you to automate. If you're on MailChimp, you should be. If you're not, you should be. And one day when you are, you're going to see MailChimp and similar enterprise email services that cater to businesses are going to ask you to automate your process. So that way, if somebody goes through your funnel, clicks on a link on your website, gives you their email, which is exactly what you want, you can now program your email system to send them emails based on different actions that person takes. So that person clicks here, they get one type of email. That person clicks there, they get another type of email. And all of those emails are intended to help them in their decision-making process, step by step by step. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 2, 3, 4. Understanding that you can automate that process is going to be a great help, because eventually you're going to have 1 million customers, 10 million customers. And with that many customers, you can't sit there and email every single one yourself, right? So, once you get to the bottom of all this, once you understand the different numbers that you're getting, it's not likes, it's basically the number that you determine based on your objectives going to your final destination. Once you understand that, in order to make this actionable, to understand the data you're getting, you have to group things together. So, although Facebook is saying, you know, you're getting X number of views, and Instagram is saying you're getting X number of likes, you decide how you want to group those based on how they're achieving those things. Once you group them into categories of different levels of engagement, guess what? Now you can start reporting, and you can more clearly correlate the feedback you're getting from these social sites and your circulations and ratings and all these other metrics you're getting. You can correlate all that to the effectiveness of your final goals, which is driving that sale. So if you're getting, you know, if you're getting 10 likes and it's driving 10 purchases, hooray. If you're getting 1,000 likes, these are likes, these are purchases, and they're driving, you know, 5 purchases, there's a problem. Now, if you're only looking at this, you're going to see, well, I want 1,000 likes. But if you're looking at this, the money part, you're going to understand that there's a disconnect there, and you're going to address it. And that is why you can, how this is all supposed to work. The actionable part of it is when you get to the bottom and you're sort of grouping your data together to correlate it to your to the numbers that you want to see. So you can sort of break it apart and sort of discombobulate. What's the word? You can break it apart and take disassemble it so that you can actually understand where the sales are coming from. Now, I have worked for companies who had no idea when the phone was going to ring. When it rang, they didn't know what the customer was going to say until I started putting a lot of these systems into place. And then you can more clearly see where your different pipelines were. And by pipelines, I mean, you don't just, you know, remember we were talking about customer A, customer B, customer C? Well, each customer comes from a different source. So, using this function here, you're going to get customers from this pipeline, customers from this pipeline, customers from that pipeline, and each pipeline is going to drive further and further down into your funnel. And that is same thing as TAM, SAM, and SUM. Any questions? I believe I'm going to leave it here because it can get more complicated, but just to give you some interesting perspective on something like this, it has been my experience that when people start their marketing campaigns, the first question that comes is, okay, we're going to be on Facebook or Twitter, let's be on both. So instead of starting it, instead of starting it from where they're supposed to start, they usually start it from here, and then they work their way up until they realize we don't know what we're doing. We don't know whether it's working or not. So when you're thinking about it, always think about your goals and objectives first, not the site you're going to be on. And finally, just to wrap it up, I guess, one thing I do want to talk about, which is on the content here and the messaging and the voice. A lot of you may be thinking about working with social media influencers, people who are Instagram famous or YouTube celebrities, because, hey, what's the quickest way to get your message out there? One good video, and you've got 500,000 views on it, of which you now get 50,000 downloads of your app or 50,000 visits to your site, whatever the number is all driven by this celebrity. Now, you're probably going to have to spend some money on that celebrity, $500, $1,000, and it's not a bad return if you're going to get 50,000 download apps from a video that got you 500,000 views, right? If that's the case, if you're getting 50,000 download apps or 50,000 visits from a video that got 500,000 views from some YouTube celebrity, if that's the case, that's not a bad investment. However, keep in mind, they control the content, not you. So you're missing your quality control. It's user generated. So they're going to do what they do, but it's not really going to tell your story the way you want. A case in point, this young man, Logan Paul, 22 years old, and he is a hot commodity on YouTube. Unfortunately, he decides he's going to put a video of a suicide victim on one of his clips on YouTube. This was happening during a recording in Japan, in a forest that's known to be the forest where people go to commit suicide. He puts it in the video, crazy uproar. The video trends immediately. Millions of views within 24 hours of him putting it up, but he has to take it down. Advertisers, such as you guys, say, we don't want to have our ads and our products associated with some dude showing suicide victims in his videos. YouTube went nuts. They had to reprimand this guy by taking him off their programs. So he's actually not making as much money as he's making prior to so that one mistake not only potentially associated his clients, you guys like you, advertisers, with this negative connotation, it also cost him money, cost you money. Other cases and points, every time you hear about some harassment situation, these harassment lawsuits, a lot of these companies are media companies, like Vice Media, for example. Advertisers love Vice Media because they're edgy and they're rough and they're reaching a young millennial audience. But guess what? Everybody's sexually harassing each other over there. Is that something you want to be associated with? So again, I bring it back to quality control is important when you're determining whether or not you're going to work with celebrity social media influencers and how you connect and associate with their products. Anyway, my name is Al Berrios. This has been my presentation on this is my framework for coming up with and implementing marketing strategy. I'm going to be doing a workshop later, and I hope to see and meet you all there and go into more in-depth detail on this, and I hope this has been useful. Thank you. Just to recap here, your homework assignment. Your homework assignment will be between now and the time when we see each other again, to determine who is your total addressable market, who's your TAM, who's your serviceable available market, who's your SAM, and ultimately who will probably very likely, almost like 99% sure, actually purchase your stuff, who's your SOM or target market, and then of course target market. And flip this around, this is your funnel as well. You know, understanding at what will it take to get from TAM to SAM to SOM. So who they are, it could be people living in a particular state, people who have a particular craving or interest or whatever. That's how you figure this out. Now, everything you're selling, there's someone out there probably already selling it to, or something similar to that. Use that as your resource, as your sort of starting point, as your baseline, if you will. Now, once you have that, you can now determine what exactly is the size of this market. By size, I mean how, if you can quantify the number of people, the number of companies, the number of users, the number of potential downloads. What is the size of that market? Because ultimately, what you want to determine is you want to price it out. You want to understand how big is it in terms of dollars, and ultimately, and this is one of the ways you determine this: how much can you charge for it? Because when you determine how much you can charge for your service, we can go back to that cable company example. It helps you understand the lifetime, the actual price and the lifetime value, and how long you can potentially keep that customer as your customer, so that you can ultimately determine how much it's going to cost you to keep that customer and get those customers, and ultimately determine how much money you're going to make. So that's what we want to know. And then, of course, as you pursue that information, try to have an idea as to which, fill in these boxes for your business. Fill in which one of these goals you want to achieve, the objectives you want to reach, the type of audience. This is the most important part. Think about it. If you've already done the research, even better. Understand the voice you want to achieve, the message and your value prop, and the content you think might work. All of that we're going to review and discuss next time. Thank you.